Welcome to the Thrive TV Show with Lauren Parsons, helping you boost your health, energy, and productivity.
Kia ora koutou. Welcome to another episode of the Thrive TV Show. I'm Lauren Parsons, your host, and today I'm joined by Steve Vamos, author of Through Shifts and Shocks, who is an amazing speaker that I got to meet last year. And today we're talking about making change your superpower. So welcome, Steve. Great to have you here.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, really looking forward to sharing your pearls of wisdom. I just love the way you communicate. I love how you take complex things and make them simple. And I think right now, with so much going on with change and technology, which has been the background and your mainstay in your career, this is really exciting. So we're going to talk about how to bring your best mindset to change, how to improve the way you work, and how to have difficult conversations that enable change. And really, I'm interested to hear about how to be your best self. So before we dive into that, Steve, can I ask you some of my this and that questions?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me, cats or dogs?
Definitely dogs.
Okay, nice. Dog lovers are always just dog lovers, aren't they? Tell me, beachfront or mountaintop?
Oh, beachfront, 100%.
Okay, nice. Fresh salad or cooked veggies?
I like them both. It's a toss-up. I'll take either, but probably salad.
Okay. Would you rather be able to speak 10 languages fluently or be able to play 10 musical instruments beautifully?
Oh, languages. Would love to be able to speak 10 languages fluently.
Yeah, nice. And would you rather go a week without your phone or a week without your car?
Car would be much easier.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely the car. A week without the car, over the phone for sure.
Okay, nice. So Steve Vamos is the global executive and former CEO with more than 40 years experience. He is an expert in information technology and digital media in Australia, New Zealand, the US, and Asia. He's been on the front line of every significant technological shift and economic shock since the 1980s in companies such as IBM, Apple, Microsoft, ninemsn, and Xero. His enduring focus in all of his leadership roles has been to build great teams and a great business culture that supports growth and high performance, which absolutely aligns with everything I believe in. So it's a thrill to have you here, Steve. Can you tell us, just to start, how did you get into what it is you're doing now?
Yeah, well, Lauren, what I'm doing now is I'm trying to do everything I can to help people like you and many others who are trying to find ways to make workplaces better, to enable people to experience workplaces where they're valued, they belong, and they also are able to perform to their potential. So making work great, I guess, is what it's all about for me. And really that came about through the evolution of my career in technology and then observing how some organizations did a great job in implementing technology and others didn't. And it'd be the same technology. And then I started to realize, well, some of these organizations change better than others and care more about the people side of what's going on. And
Hmm.
that correlation then led me away from being, let's say, tech obsessed to
Yes,
being people and leadership obsessed, and particularly team obsessed. So
right.
that's really been an evolution over, I'd say, many, many years.
I think that's what's so refreshing is that obviously we know there's so much that technology can do for us, and there are a lot of people that are very tech focused, and yet at the heart of it, you focus on people, and you have a really unique outlook on what technology change really means for people. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, remember, technology doesn't innovate, people do.
Hmm.
And even in this world of talking about AI and how it's going to radically change work, yes, there'll be elements of work that it will radically change, but you still need people to work, get up in the morning, be motivated to do something. And you still need people to always look at what technology is doing and whether it's acceptable to our community, acceptable to the organization we're working with. So um, I think that there's still the human element to me is the bleeding obvious. And it's the lack of focus on that. Even the words people are our greatest asset.
Hmm.
Well, many of us experience environments where they're words, not actions. And what I've learned through experience, and I guess the good fortune of being in organizations that were fast changing and often at their worst times, experiencing great places at bad times really made me see how it's the human element that matters most. It's the leadership, the people at the top, but it's also how people respond. And so I'm obsessive about the human element of change, but also of technology and everything else going on, because that's logically, rationally, common sense. Unfortunately, common sense isn't always common practice. I wish it was, but it isn't.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. So can you share some of the stories? Be really interested for to hear some of the challenges and the changes that you have faced in those big organizations. What were some of the big waves of change that came through and what happened?
Yeah, look, I've seen every technology change pretty much close up. So the first one was the evolution of the mini computer, which put technology for the first time into mid-sized companies and government organizations. And from there, the PC, client server, the internet. I was right there at the beginning of the digital media revolution. And in a sense, maybe just pausing there for a minute, that was one of the experiences that really made me aware of the human element of these
Hmm.
technology change. So I joined ninemsn, which was a startup at the time. And ninemsn was in the digital media business. So I was selling advertising and producing media content, online content. And the interesting thing about that was the experts at the time in media and advertising did not believe that internet advertising would ever work or ever pay. In fact, they would say things like banner advertising online doesn't work. Now, obviously, we had to do the work to provide evidence that it did. But now you look at television and it's plastered with banners. But you also have seen the demise of so many once powerful and successful traditional media and advertising organizations. So that was a big message to me that the way we think, the way humans think, the way leaders think in the face of change will define their fate. Are they open to change, receptive to it, or are they responding the wrong way in the face of change? Unfortunately for us humans, the wrong way is often more natural. It's
Yes.
more natural to be change resistant because
Yeah.
in the face of change, I'm going to fear it. In the face of change, I'm going to want to look after and protect myself. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to hurt people's feelings. So, unfortunately, in the face of change, you have to overcome those human fears and desires to protect yourself and open yourself up to others, to learning, to taking risks and experiencing failure and learning from it. So it takes, in a sense, the best version of humans, of ourselves, to face into change the most effective way. So that was a really big lesson in the digital media time. But since then, continued to, experience different technology changes. Xero was fortunate enough to be involved with a company that really is a great example of how software became software as a service rather than software that was on your computer on your premises. So that was another big wave. And the latest one, of course, is AI.
Yes. I was just going to ask about AI. I guess the biggest question is how should we all be responding to AI? What would you say?
Look, I think it's bring the right mindset to AI. So the first is, and this is something I learned over many years, don't respond to what you hear by thinking it's stupid or isn't going to affect you. Because until you understand it and you've surrounded yourself with some people who know more than you do, you're best to withhold opinions. So I now am very careful not to label something as silly or stupid anymore. I used to all the time. And
Hmm.
now there's a little voice in my head which gets to being conscious of my thinking, which says, Steve, you've been wrong so often before, you know, don't judge till you know more. So I'd say the key thing in the face of change is not to try and control things, which is natural, but to let go and focus on caring, connecting, and enabling others. It's not to be fearful of mistakes and becoming mistake averse because there's nothing you're good at today that you didn't get good at by making mistakes as you learn. So you have
Okay.
to welcome mistakes as learning, as helping you on the path to finding your right way through the changing circumstance that AI is going to bring. And finally, be a learn-it-all rather than know-it-all. You know, suspend your past success, your
Uh,
past experiences, hold them, but don't let them rule you because it is a different world. It's a new world. You know, AI is a world where language is going to be, English language and other languages will be the interface to data and information. Yeah, that's radically different to a world where it had to go through programmers.
yes.
Um, so, so I would say bring the right mindset to change as best you can. And to do that, you have to be conscious of which mindset you're applying. So
That's
being
so true.
mindful, self-aware, whatever way you can find, whether it's take a breath, go for a walk, whatever you can do to slow things down in the moment, particularly when you're feeling stressed and worried about change, that's
Hmm.
really powerful because then you can, in a sense, overcome that desire to want to control and not make mistakes and to know and be a
Yes.
better version, the best version of yourself in the face of change.
And I love that phrase of be a learn-it-all rather than a know-it-all. Obviously, we do rest on our former knowledge, but it's absolutely true that if we can surround ourselves with people that are smarter than us, if we can find people that are already innovating, that are already using technology in different ways, and just be curious and bring that curious mindset. I think curiosity is a wonderful thing, isn't it, when you're going through change, to hopefully find some different ways to navigate it. And it is interesting that we have such a natural resistance to change.
Yeah,
So, what are
Lauren,
some practical ways people overcome that?
and Lauren, you know, I think that first of all, I say to people, it is hard. So don't feel bad about the fact that you might find change difficult or hard. We all do. And you're not going to get it right every time. I still don't. But the more you can become conscious that, this is a change situation. Okay. And maybe when your temperature's rising, that's a good time to pause and think about how am I responding? What thinking am I bringing to this situation? But whatever way you can find to slow the moment down so that you're not acting from that fear and self-protection, but you're acting from your eye on what's happening around you. That's the key. And it's a personal thing because we're all different in the way that we can achieve that. People, have different ways. I had someone who worked with me that used to react really negatively and instantly to criticism and things that were changing.
Hmm.
And I had a really long conversation about what was triggering it. And it all had to do with self-worth and growing up not feeling appreciated by parents.
Hmm.
And so I said, you have to deal with the issue or you have to deal with the symptom of the issue. And the executive I was working with went away and came back and said, I'm going to deal with the way it plays out. I can't fix the root cause, but I can fix how I behave.
Hmm.
And the path to that was breathing.
Yes.
So what this executive did was whenever a conversation happened that was any way sensitive or tense, there was a breath. You could see the pause and the breath before the response.
Hmm.
So it's a journey, but it's one of those things. It's a lifelong journey of getting better and better at these things. But being
Absolutely.
self-aware is super important.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that key to emotional intelligence, isn't it? And being able to regulate and notice your emotions. And you keep mentioning that word, self-aware.
Mm,
How often are we not aware of how we're reacting, responding, and how can we slow it down? I love that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful. So, how do we have the sort of difficult conversations that we need to have that actually enable change?
Well, this is really important. Maybe just stepping back for a sec. So I can't see this whole domain of change being a superpower as three things.
Hmm.
It's your mindset and self-awareness, which you've touched on. The second is to appreciate that any change you're trying to create, no matter what the domain is a function of doing three things and doing them iteratively. In other words, there's no end point. It's one of continual sort of change and adaptation. It's like sailing. Instead of going from A to B in a straight line, you're tacking
Hmm.
back and forward based on what you learn and what you experience and the conditions. So I look at it as the iteration between being clear, which means clarity of purpose and priorities as best you can. It's never 100% clear, particularly in change, but you've got to anchor yourself in, here is my best view of what's going on, and therefore this is what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, and this is what we're going to do. Then you align. This is really tough. You align your actions, your resources, everything to those priorities around change or dealing with the change you're facing. Often this is where the game is lost
Okay.
because the intention is there, but the action doesn't follow through. So you see this in organizations where execs get up and say, we want to be more customer centric, but there's no concern for the reality of people in the organization who are working the way they have been, and that changing that requires real focus, real time.
Hmm.
So alignment is really key. It's often the missing link. And then finally, it's focus on performance because it's
Hmm.
focusing on how you're going that allows you to adapt your clarity, your sense of clarity, evolve it, evolve your priorities based on experience. So it's kind of like a circle, clear, aligned, how are we going? Clear, aligned, how are we going? Around and around. Now, in the middle of all that is one thing which enables all of this. That is all we have, and that's the words we use.
Right.
There's no change without words.
Hmm.
There's no change without words spoken or written. So words are all we have. So the quality of our conversations, the directness, the honesty, the effectiveness of conversations is what fuels that process. So if your conversations aren't very good and honest, you're not going to find, you're not going to achieve alignment because alignment is all about, very direct conversations about where are we moving people to and from, where are we moving money to and from, what choices will we make about technology. So you need to have plenty of conversations that are challenging around alignment. You need to have plenty of conversations around performance, performance of the organization, performance of the people, performance of change programs. And then again, you've got to have conversations about your clarity, your purpose. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
toughest conversations organizations have is why are we here and should that change? And we've seen many organizations change their purpose. So having difficult conversations, challenging conversations is critical. It's the enabler of all of this loop of evolution. And so doing that to me is three things. One is context.
Hmm.
So making sure you've asked all the questions you need and you've pardon me, taken the time you need to understand the circumstances leading up to the conversation. Why
Yes.
are things not going well? Why isn't someone not performing well? Why is there a resource imbalance in the organization to achieve what we're trying to achieve? So it's really context, and it's like two ears and one mouth for a reason. Lots
Hmm.
of questions before you launch into any conclusions. So context. The second is care. You've got to care about people, particularly those on the other end of these conversations, because difficult conversations, often it can be things like saying no to good people, saying no to good ideas, um, telling people then maybe not suited for the role they're in. And, you've got to show up with a care for those people because that really makes the conversation so much more enabled because people are less likely then to react under threat
Yes.
and fear than they
Hmm.
are to be more logical about what you're saying. Um, there's a great expression that stayed with me. I can't remember who said it to me, but they said, if you want people to think you care, you have to care. And it's a really important message. And this is why, I have a real allergic reaction to leaders who clearly demonstrate they don't care much about people.
Yeah.
And we're
It
seeing too much
boggles
of
the
that.
mind, doesn't it? That people even have that hard-nosed
Yeah.
attitude or yeah.
Well, it's
Hmm.
bad character. It's bad modeling that they've experienced. They don't know better often. And the final one is courage.
Nice.
So context, care, and courage. Courage is you got to do it. Don't avoid it. Because once you do it, you see how everybody's ultimately better off. They're not always going to agree with you that they're better off, but from an organizational leadership perspective, you're going to find that those conversations lead to more people being happier.
Yeah.
And so the more you do it, the more it doesn't become easy, never will be easy, but it becomes easier because you're motivated by the knowledge that there'll be a better place at the end of it. So that's kind of my, so, and I think this is really, if you say if there's one thing that will define whether or not your change initiatives in your organization are effective or not, it's the quality of the conversations you
Yeah, so true.
have.
I love that. So much clarity, just even in those couple of frameworks, getting clarity. Who
Yeah.
are you? What are you doing? What's this change for? What do we want it to look like? So key. And then getting that alignment, actually taking steps to make it happen, allocating resource, doing the work, and then performance, looking at how we're doing. And so you talked about conversations. What would you say to people that don't feel confident having those courageous conversations? What's their first step?
Yeah, it's I guess hopefully encouragement from you and me and others that you're in a position where it's things won't change for you unless you speak.
Hmm.
Oh, it might. Look, there might be other ways, but you know, it's you want to if you want to leave your life in the hands of others, you can do that, but uh yeah, if learning to face into the difficult conversation and boy, I tell you what, in your personal life, it's a lot harder than your professional life. So getting on top of it in your professional life where it's not generally, I got to be careful because obviously health industry and others are matters of life and death. But for us personally, the how we're working together conversations are not what I'd say on the 10 out of 10 for degree of difficulty. They're the ones, those ones are more in your personal life, right? But
Yeah.
so I would just say, you know, give it a crack. Like you won't regret it. You have to have the courage and by the way, the important thing about that is if you do it and you don't get any progress, it tells you something about the environment you're working in. And
Hmm.
maybe you're better off somewhere else. If you're living in that much fear and you're really not in a good environment for you, then I'd say, you know, start looking for something else.
Yeah, interesting. When I talk to people about courageous conversations, which I agree are really key and how we communicate, I often talk to people about, if this is important, actually take some time to prepare before you go into that conversation, which sounds similar to what you were talking about around context, understand the
Yeah.
context. And what I found is that people, when they use a planning tool that I have around courageous conversations, that goes in and clarifies what is it I want to happen? What exactly do I want to see? Why is this important to me? Why is this important to the other person? That they go and have the conversation, and 99% of the time they'll come back to me and say, when I ask them, how did that go? And they'll say, oh, it was so much easier than I thought it would be.
Oh,
So I
great.
love that, but sometimes you've got to have the courage to start. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm glad you just added that because that's really important. And what getting advice from others as well that can help coach you is fantastic. I mean, I remember the first time I had to give a person performance feedback. I was so scared, so nervous, and I sat down with an HR person from that was kind of assigned to our part of the business, and they helped me through just the way you've helped people as well in terms of, okay, this is the conversation, this is the way to structure it. And I was still super nervous, but I got through it, and it wasn't easy, but yeah, getting that advice and encouragement from others and leaning on others is a great way to look at it.
Wonderful. You also talked about getting comfortable with making mistakes, experimenting, making mistakes. Can you tell us a bit more about that, or any stories, times that, challenges that you've faced where that's been important?
Yeah, the thing about I said it before, and I really want to say it again, which is we don't become good at anything without making mistakes on the way. It's so obvious. So in the context of learning and doing new things, and it's important for leaders to really make that context clear that we are trying to do something new here. We want you guys and the people out there to try do different things. And if there are mistakes, how you respond to that is so important. But I've learned elements of that through experience. First, one I would say, one story I would say would be certainly in the ninemsn days at the beginning of the digital media revolution,
Hmm.
we had a number of businesses that we started that were never going to be successful. One was within ninemsn, was trying, we would have, if we'd have done everything we wanted to do, we would have been a travel website, a financial services website. We would have been everything. And we realized pretty quickly that particularly one area was news, where we put journalists around the country trying to compete with the big news originators and producers and realized we're not going to be able to do this. And so we had to shut that operation down, which was really tough. And it was a mistake to have ever set it up. But the beauty of that was that was really critical to us learning that we can only do a few things really well. And let's be clear about the one, two, or three things maximum that we're going to try and do and be. But
Nice.
but in terms of mistakes, probably one of the best lessons I ever had was I was a sales manager in Canberra trying to sell a big computer system to a university. And um, I had a sales representative on the account working for me who was, 30 years older than I was. And so obviously I had tremendous sort of natural respect for the experience this fellow brought to the job. But I
Hmm.
also had the managing director of the company, IBM, involved in the sales process. And I would often get the managing director, Brian Finn, to come along and meet with the customer. And every time he did, he'd come back to me and say to me, Steve, I really don't feel good about this one. I think you're going to lose it. And I'd say, no, no, we're going to win this. My sales manager's got a great relationship with the customer. They drink sherries together on Fridays. There's no way that, that I just can't see it. Well, anyway, I got a bit nervous and I asked the sales representative, there's no chance that this friend of yours is going to ring you up one day and say, sorry, we bought from someone else. And he said, no, no way. No, we're like this. It's all good. So anyway, one day, not long after, my sales representative didn't come into the office until late and I hadn't come in. And finally, I got a call from him. And he said, listen, I've got bad news. I got a call from the customer basically saying they bought from someone else. Then I had to call the managing director of the company to tell him the news.
Yeah.
And I did. I ring him and I go, Brian, I've got some bad news. We lost the business. And I'm expecting him to scream at me and tell me, you should, I told you so. I told you so. All he said was, Steve, I'm really sorry to hear it. And I hope that you learned something from this experience.
Wow. That's
And that
leadership.
was it. And I tell you what, that had a massive impact on my awareness and consciousness about how you face into failure, when it's not you, but it's someone working in your organization that has made a mistake or failed.
Yes. So true. So as we're on this, I mean, it's an ever evolving technological landscape, but particularly with AI still being so new. And I think, well, I don't know, I'm certainly grappling with how do I use this? Am I going too slow? Am I trying too many things? And you mentioned even before we started the recording, just the ramifications for authors like ourselves, for content creators. I've certainly held back as an author from not wanting to have AI write stuff for me. But I've realized that if I can actually, for example, I did an online survey and I got lots of information and I ended up asking to get some help from AI to simplify it. And I found that was really useful. But these are baby steps that I feel I'm taking. What would you say to people that are still wrapping their head around this AI change? Practical tips, advice?
Yeah, look, I think what you're doing is great. I think baby steps is a good place to start. We all start somewhere, and I would say use the tools and get to see what they do. Remember, the reality is this is like a super advanced search. So you shouldn't feel bad about using AI to help you in your work because we've been using Google and other search engines for 20 years now. So
Mm,
this is, obviously, you've got to be cautious when you're putting the output of AI. I mean, AI is
yes,
wrong often because it's only as good as the data that's in there.
that's right.
So there's an old saying in the tech industry, garbage in, garbage out. So the data that is in it has to be quality data for you to be confident that the what AI is telling you is right. But at the end of the day, look, you can get AI to create a lot of content for you, but as a content producer, The content itself is only a very small part of what makes you successful. I mean, what really makes you successful is the energy and enthusiasm you put into what you're trying to do, and the connections you make to other people,
Yeah.
and and the relevance that they feel for what you're doing. So, yes, it makes sometimes can make writing something quicker, but it doesn't necessarily make the relevance of that writing more significant to others out there. So I think a lot will change, but a lot won't change.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people to use AI, get a sense for it. And then the more that AI is relevant to the work you do, I just say start using some of the applications and learn from others. So, but it's going to be a huge change, but not.
Yes, I agree. And like you say, some things are going to change, some things are going to stay the same. And what's
Yeah.
absolutely true is that people and our ability to bring ourselves, our emotions, our lens, our energy, all of that is going to be more important than ever. You think, we've been through the Industrial Revolution, we've been through technological changes, but what is going to, I guess, drive things forward is how we as humans bring to life all the things, and AI as a tool. I love what you said right near the very start that technology doesn't innovate. Is that right? Technology doesn't
Right.
innovate, people do,
People
right?
do. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's absolutely. And look, I, there's been a ton of technology out there for a long time. And the reason why the work you do is so important, and the reason why I obsess about the human element, is that technology is going to waste every day because organizations aren't capable of changing effectively enough. Yeah, here's a great example for you. I reckon this is,
Hmm.
I don't even know whether I'm on the right track here. So some people see this and they say, well, I think there's a real issue right now with productivity that is being enabled by AI. And productivity means that what's happening is youngsters and when young people in the workplace are using these tools, and I think many of them, obviously in work environments that are not a traditional office work, not sort of physical work where you're meant to be there to do the work, right? So in
Hmm.
work that is outside that physical work domain, these tools mean they're getting through their full-time job in much quicker time. I know this from people close to me.
Okay,
They're getting through their full-time job in 3 days,
great.
and they're working on their side hustles.
Okay.
And the reason that's enabled is because their management is asleep at the wheel.
Mm,
And management of people, people leadership is a lost art. It is the art where you allocate. So what's happening is people are allocating work to people in a way which should be along like Lauren, I want you to produce 10 widgets.
hmm.
Okay. And you go, thank you, boss. I'll produce 10 widgets. You end up getting better at producing those widgets and you've got spare time. So you go off and do other things. Whereas if I was your boss and instead of saying, Lauren, produce 10 widgets, I said, Lauren, you know how we produce widgets. What do you think is the best way for us to produce as many as we can in a week?
Mm, yeah,
What do
people
you
are
reckon?
guided by wanting to win, right? We want to
Yeah.
succeed. And
What's the
before, when you were
potential?
sharing that, I was almost picturing when you were saying, if people can get their job done in 3 days, whether there was going to be fear for them to tell their boss that, thinking, oh, now is my job going to be cut back to 3 days? Whereas my mind initially jumped to, wow, if I can get it done in 3 days, what else can I do? How else can I add more value? How can we improve the way we do things?
Yeah.
Can
And
we
that's
do that?
because people management too often is about managing by task, not managing by potential.
Hmm.
So there's one question that I think maybe on that makes a little bit of sense to touch on, which is any work team you're part of, the question to ask yourself and yourselves as a team is out of 10, how do we rate or score our performance versus what's possible with what
Nice.
we have today? With what we have today. So
Hmm.
with the resources we have available today, not if we had more money, more people, whatever, better tools. No, with what you've got today, rate out of 10 how your team is performing relative to what's possible. And you know what? People ask about 60% plus of people I've asked that question over many years have never worked on a team they'd rate 8 out of 10 or better. Never.
Wow.
And
Wow.
good teams typically rate themselves 6 or 7. So start with that question and then identify the one thing you want to change to make it better.
I was going to say, because that leads you trying to think, okay, if we're at a 7, how do we get to an 8? If we're at a
Yeah.
4, how do we get to a 5? Yeah,
Yeah.
great. I
And
love it.
it's a really powerful question. And but it's the point is that winning in every context is not necessarily anything more than being better today than I was yesterday.
Hmm.
And that's what being change as a superpower is about evolving a conviction, a commitment, an energy around getting better every day.
Hmm.
That's it.
Love it. Steve, we could just chat about this all day. I love what you've shared. If people want to get in touch with you or access your book or hear about your work, what's the best way to do that?
There's a website, stevevamos.com, just my name, so you can sort of see it there. It's just one word, stevevamos.com.
Nice.
There's also LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. So I'm active on LinkedIn, again, just my name. And yeah, they're the best ways to get me, reach me.
Nice. Fantastic. So just to close, I just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. Steve, if I can just ask you, if there's one final thought you want to share with our listeners today, what would that be?
It really would be that that because we've covered so many things, I'd say if you want your work environment to be better, more effective than it is today, just start the conversation and involve others around you in that conversation. The beauty of that last question is that you're not pointing the finger at any individual because you're not talking about them or him or her. You're talking about we. How do we work better together? And even in that conversation with people you're working with, if you can just take even 10 minutes to talk about, if it was you and me, Lauren, I'd say, Lauren, let's talk about the thing that we think is the best thing about how we work together and what's positive. And let's talk about one thing we could do to improve how we work together.
Yes,
And
love it.
those little things every day are actually the thing that delivers a big difference in the future. And people feel it. Just a conviction around making things better.
Love it. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve. Love hearing your wisdom and such a joy to share it with my
Thank,
listeners today.
well, thanks for having me, Lauren. I really appreciate it. And congrats and well done to you. The work you're doing is super important. And it's great we have you out there doing it.
Oh, thank you. So thank you to everyone for tuning in. That's been another episode of the Thrive TV show. Go out and thrive.
Thank you for listening to the Thrive TV Show with Lauren Parsons. Visit thrivetvshow.com to access the show notes and discover our fantastic bonus content. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring episode.